Hello, all you fishermen. Today we're actually going to look at places in southern Wisconsin. I've got a little bit few more than a dozen of them where you can actually get the mighty walleye. Now, when I say walleye, I mean that kind of like fish, like walleye, sauger, or saugeye. I'm just going to call them all walleye. They kind of look similar. I know there's differences, like saugers tend to be more like blotchy and walleye are more like one solid color, and they all taste great. So, if you are interested in walleye, let's actually go over the 15 or so places I have on this list. The first place I'm going to tell you about is Danville Dam or the Danville Mill Pond. There are some pretty big ones in here, and you can use either minnows or you can actually catch them on swim bait as well. But they're pretty good if you actually use neon colored worms. Not really sure where you get the neon colored worms, but I saw one of the guys fishing by me use them, and he caught a pretty big one. Danville Dam. The next one is actually like Yellowstone Lake Dam. That is basically where the Yellowstone River issues from, and it actually flows out of Yellowstone Lake State Park. That place is generally pretty crowded in terms of fishing, but there are really, really good size walleye there and saugers there as well. So Yellowstone Dam in Wisconsin, of course, not the Yellowstone National Park, but Yellowstone Dam in Wisconsin. The third place is Lodi Dam. Now, this is actually not one that people know that much about. The Lodi Spillway, it's in downtown Lodi, and you actually catch saugers there. I don't think there are walleye here, but there are really good saugers here. I've caught them 16, 17 inches, basically just downstream from the dam where kind of like the water is flowing straight down the little corridor right downstream from the dam. There are some minnows there, and there are a lot of saugers there. I've caught several of them in that place. I think that creek overall just has a decent amount of saugers. The creek in Lodi is more known for trout, but there are a good amount of saugers there, and I've caught them. So Lodi Spillway in downtown Lodi. The fourth place is Lundens Lake Spillway. Now, this is in Mineral Point. Lundens Lake is a lake. The lake itself is not all that impressive for fishing, but the spillway right here is pretty impressive. Now, during the summer, kids do use this as a water slide. I go to Lundens Lake to fish for gato fish more than anything else, and it's also very well known for large and smallmouth bass. Caught both gato fish and bass there, and also there are some big walleye in there. I haven't caught huge ones in there, but I did see a guy on the other side pull out like a 30-incher. So Lundens Lake Spillway. Pretty big walleye in this spillway. The next one I'm going to talk about, everyone knows, Indian Ford. Indian Ford Dam. Now, I go to Indian Ford once again to hunt for giant flatheads and to catch some good channels, but below the dam, there is decent walleye if you go there at the right time of the year, generally more of like spring or fall when the water is a little bit higher. Indian Ford does actually have a decent amount of walleye. Yeah, and yes, I have actually caught walleye at Indian Ford in the summer before, just not in great quantity. The next one is actually going to be in Madison, and it's actually like Marshall Park in Middleton. And Marshall Park in Middleton is good for, I think, walleye at night and basically late evening and early morning. And you want to fish from late spring into early summer, maybe even into midsummer. Like it usually kind of like dies off by July or so, depending on how the weather is. This year it kind of died off a little bit earlier, but kind of like right at basically at the mouth of the lagoon at dawn and dusk. Those are the best times to fish for walleye. I usually use some kind of swim bait. I think a Rapala would work as well. If you use worms, walleye do bite worms, but you're probably going to get more of like a white bass bite or like a yellow perch bite more than a walleye bite because they both exist there at dawn and dusk as well. So Marshall Park, the mouth of the lagoon, late spring into early summer, maybe even somewhat into midsummer. Marshall Park. So the other one is the Lake Mendota entry place, and that is one of my favorite places for gato fish. But on the other side where I usually fish for gato fish, that means the side facing Cherokee Marsh, if you can actually launch way in there, like early summer-wise, if you can launch all the way out in here, there are some decent walleye to be had. Now there's some like white bass and walleye under the bridge too, but I think if you want to go for walleye, I would launch flies actually out into the deeper part facing Cherokee Marsh. I'm pretty sure there are probably walleye in like the on the other side where I fish for gato fish, but I think most of those splashes are bass. But if you launch like out into Cherokee Marsh, there is some good walleye like late spring, early summer. The other one is around Madison is 6 Mile Creek. Now, 6 Mile Creek, it's basically the part that crosses County M, and you don't actually want to go on any of the County M kind of like spots on the side. There's this like boardwalk right here that cyclists and walkers can actually go across 6 Mile Creek. You kind of want to fish from this boardwalk and use like small swim baits or small minnows, and there will be walleye down. Now, the walleye that you catch from here are actually pretty small, so there are no keepers, but there are some decent. There's some walleye. There's some numbers of walleye in this creek. I would say like mostly throughout the summer, but you will to catch the walleye, you will want to go onto this Westport CTHM boardwalk. You don't really want to fish like from the sides of the road because the boardwalk. I think like the walleye are more covered in this creek throughout the boardwalk for some reason, and it's just much easier to fish from the boardwalk and cast out that way. So that is the 6 Mile Creek area. The next one is Fort Atkinson. Now, I actually fish in front of the Rock River Bait Shop or where the bark enters the rock. And this is best. You can catch them year round, but it's by far the best in the spring, especially when the rock is flooded, which means this year it's kind of sucked because the rock was really, really low all the time. But even this year, we caught quite a few. And for this, you will actually want to use flies. Rock River Bait Shop actually has those flies. I believe they're like, what you can get like one for $2 or something. Generally like size 6 hooks with flies. The Rock River Bait Shop does actually sell them, so you can actually get them there. And if you want to know how to rig them up, look up Wolf River Rig online, and that's how you would rig them up. People have a lot of success catching walleyes with flies, and I've caught quite a few of them this year there myself. Likewise, Jefferson, a little bit upstream on the rock, also has them. Jefferson Dam during the spring and fall walleye runs. By the way, the fall walleye run is actually late October into early November. The spring walleye run is like March and April. It's kind of almost like sometimes shoulder to shoulder there around the dam area. And you can use flies, or I think swim baits actually work pretty well too. I've actually had pretty decent luck with like rapalas around the Jefferson Dam area. The other one is Tensfeld Park in Jefferson, which is a little bit more downstream, and there you will actually want to use flies to catch the walleye. So that's pretty cool with the walleye at Jefferson, 2 places, Tensfeld Park and Jefferson Dam. I'd rather fish at Tensfeld just because there's less people there. I think the dam probably has more walleye, but tossing the flies at Tensfeld Park, I get pretty decent results as well. The next place is Tolon State Park. Now, Tolon State Park, not many people fish at all, and there's not a huge amount of walleye there. It's more like catfish and carp and some drum, but I have caught walleye there. I basically use the small curly-tailed grub, and I have caught some smaller walleye there. So they do actually exist, but I have actually tossed out minnows there, and I haven't had great success, so I don't think there's a huge amount of walleye there, but there is walleye there, and I have caught them at Tolon State Park. Also, the reason why no one really fishes Tolon is because the access at Tolon sucks. I will try it out in the spring before the growth actually gets in, but then the water is higher, so it might still suck. So Tolon State Park, the walleye are there. The access is horrible, and generally I don't think there's that many of them there, at least not in the summer when I actually fished Tolon. The next place is a little bit north, Lake Delton Dam. Now, this Lake Delton Dam is more or less in the spring. I don't think in the summer there's that many walleye. In the summer, it's more like bowfin and smallmouth bass and some catfish maybe. But Lake Delton Dam in the spring does have a decent amount of walleye, so you can go for walleye there. In the summer, Lake Wisconsin at the Merrimack Ferry on the Lodi side, the Wayside Park, there is a fishing platform, and specifically around dusk is where you actually want to fish for white bass and walleye. Now, if you actually fish like early dusk, you'll probably get a lot of white bass. If you after the sun goes down, like in the half an hour after the sun goes down, that's when you get the walleye. Now, I have to say, I've only caught like 1 or 2 that are decent sized there. Most of them are very small, so they're not going to get too many keepers at Lake Wisconsin at the Merrimack Ferry. But if you want to just catch some walleye, some white bass, and even some smallies, toss like a rapala, a brightly colored rapala The neon colored or the chartreuse colored Rapala work the best. Or if you have a glow in the dark Rapala, even better. But basically, the like a half an hour or an hour after dark, that's when the walleye bite. And I've caught many, many, many walleye off that platform there. Lake Wisconsin at the Merrimack Ferry on the Lodi side. So the other place I kind of like is Prairie Du Sac. That is across from the eagle watching building beneath the bridge. Now, you don't really want to go into like the whole area is a beach, but you kind of want to stay closer to the bridge. You don't want to be directly under the bridge, just like a little bit away from the bridge. And if you don't want to use Magnum fatheads, which you can buy at that Riverview bait shop, you can actually use flies. I mean, I've caught them with lures as well, but flies generally work better for me there. But generally, if you get the Magnum fatheads, especially like in May, the Magnum fatheads just crush the walleye. You will get white bass as well there, but the Magnum fatheads just completely crush the walleye there. Now, to be fair, the walleye there aren't that big. I've seen a couple of keepers. I've caught a couple of keepers, but most of them are around 12, 13 inches there. So not huge walleye there. But you can get a couple of keepers every once in a while. You will actually get some white bass as well, but there will be a lot of walleye, especially in the spring. In the summer, like when it's really hot, it kind of tends to die down. But in the spring, that is a very, very good walleye area, especially if you fish with Magnum fathead minnows, which you can buy at the bait shop in Prairie Du Sac. Now, my two favorite places I'm going to go over now. The one is Newport Park in Wisconsin Dells. Now, this is summer. You will want a minnow net here. This is above the Prairie Du Sac Dam, so you can actually net minnows in the water and use them. And these minnows work better than the bait shop minnows because it's natural bait in the water. So bring yourself like a minnow net or something, and you will have an infinite amount of bait. You want to do this after dark because that's when the walleye and the white bass hit. Basically, what you do is you take a number one size circle hook, string 2 or 3 minnows on there, throw it out, and eventually, after a couple of minutes, you will get a hit. Now, you will get both white bass and walleye, but the walleye I've caught at Newport are fairly big. I've caught multiple 16 plus and even 18 plus at Newport Park, and they hit like crazy after dark. So Newport Park, definitely a great walleye area. And probably the easiest area I can think of to actually catch walleye. Very few snags there, if any at all, and infinite supply of minnow bait. Use like a size 1 hook, string a couple of them on, throw it out, and after a couple of minutes, you will get a walleye or a white bass. I think they hit at about equal proportion at Newport. Now, my favorite place, and it's not because of the amount of walleye there. There's a good amount of walleye here, but I actually think Newport has actually more walleye, but it's the size of the walleye here, and that is Prairie Du Sac Dam. Now, Prairie Du Sac Dam, there's like specific conditions that I really like fishing there. If they're not really met, it's not quite as good. You want to go to Prairie Du Sac, at least for me, in the summer when the water is not too high and not too low. High water is actually the worst conditions, and low water, you just get snagged a lot more, but you still can catch a decent amount of walleye in low water. So there's a specific way you fish at Prairie Du Sac Dam. It's actually like generally around sunset or after dark. And usually there's not a lot of people at Prairie Du Sac after dark, so you should have at least some real estate on the river to actually fish. The reason there's a specific bait I use at Prairie Du Sac Dam that's there like around sunset after dark, and that is shad. Shad actually come in very, very shallow in the summer after dark, and there's tons of them. Now, shad are not classified as minnows because below Prairie Du Sac Dam, you are not actually allowed to use minnow nets or catch minnows as bait, but shad are classified as rough fish. So you can actually catch shad and use them as bait. Now cast nets are illegal in Wisconsin, so you can't use that. You can't use a minnow net, but you can use a regular landing net. And they come up shallow enough where you can just stick your hand out or just wait a little bit in the water and get some shad. The reason they don't allow cast nets is not really because of other things get stuck in the cast nets. It's because they don't want you transplanting bait across waters. And cast nets tend to get tons and tons of bait fish. Like there's literally hundreds of shad there at Prairie Du Sac Dam, and if someone throws a cast net out, gets out 50 of them, doesn't use them all, they're really tempted to keep that shad and then go fish somewhere else for that shad because shad's really good bait. That's why cast nets are actually legal in Wisconsin. So the the spirit of that law is to not allow people to actually transplant like fish from one place to the other. So you are actually allowed to use your landing net to catch shad. However, you are not allowed to transport that shad away from Prairie Du Sac Dam. You must use it as bait at Prairie Du Sac Dam. I've actually talked to several DNR people about this, and every single one of them have said the actual intent of the law is not just because cast nets are evil, like they really wish we could use cast nets, but they know that people will actually abuse that and keep the shad and keep the leftover shad to use elsewhere. They don't want that to happen. That's why that cast net law is there, not really because cast nets are bad or anything. So if you do use your landing net to catch shad, like sometimes I do, you have to use it there at Prairie Du Sac. But that's great because Prairie Du Sac has a lot of fish that you can catch with shad. Shad actually make really, really good bait for big walleye because usually you don't get a white bass eating them because most of the white bass there are too small. If you get a white bass on shad, it's going to be a huge white bass. So what I do is I usually use like a 3/0 hook, maybe 2/0 hook, maybe a string two of the shads together, throw it out, not too deep, but not really shallow either. I get it at maybe like 3.5 foot of water or something like that. Wait for a while, and if the conditions are right, the walleye will slam it after dark. I think all my walleye there have been 16 plus. I don't think I've ever caught a walleye there that's less than 16 inches using this method, and I've caught a lot of them. My personal best this summer was 25 inches, but a lot of them are like in that 20, like in the 16 to 20 inch category, and 20 plus walleyes are not uncommon at Prairie Du Sac Dam. So that is where I catch my walleye. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe and hit that bell notifications button. And if you want to know where I catch other kinds of fish, let me know and maybe I'll make a video about that as well. So thank you. Have a nice day, and I will see you on the next fishing adventure.